I've been thinking for some time about tackling the issue of transgender issues. My hesitation is in, who am I to talk about transgender? I'm not trans. I don't know what it's like to be trans, and I don't know much about trans issues. I was leery of entering the discussion because of what happened to Rachel Oates with the whole fiasco with Essence of Thought. But it's my generation that's lagging behind in understanding. It's my generation that needs to learn to deal with this as more people come out as trans or non-binary. So I'm trying to educate myself, and I'll take you along on my journey. If I get something wrong, please leave a comment and let me know. I'm sure I will use at least one term incorrectly somewhere in this video. So let's have a chat. I have known that being trans was a thing for a few years now, but I didn't try to understand it in the beginning because it didn't seem to affect me. But as I am meeting more and more trans and non-binary people, I am starting to get a better understanding. I first heard of transgender when Renee Richards transitioned in 1976. It was presented to me then as something that she did to be able to play women's tennis because she couldn't go as far in male sports as she wanted and felt she could do better in female sports. I've been since told that this is false, that Renee is trans, not a pretender. But because this was presented to me in a way to accomplish a particular goal and not as a mental health issue, I had no reason to think about any issues for trans people, or even that there were trans people. So young people, and by young people I mean everyone that can't remember 1976, this is part of why it is difficult for you to get through to my generation. For me, and most people older than me, our introduction to transgender was not that this was a real problem for a significant portion of the population, but rather it was a sports issue for one person. So if you're having a conversation with an older person on this topic and you are getting nowhere, you might need to start by showing the person that Renee Richards is a woman. She has been for decades, and her transformation wasn't about tennis. It was about who she is. In making this video, I wanted to stay away from the topic of transgender in sports. I don't know enough to even initiate a good discussion, but it's impossible to talk about people's understanding of transgender and not talk about sports at all, because the first impressions of transgender people for older people is through sports figures. Caitlyn Jenner was my second encounter with the trans issue. Caitlyn was confusing for me. She challenged my ideas of what gender means. I believe this is exactly what she intended. She could have transitioned and said nothing publicly, but her publicity was the beginning of the dialogue for so many people. Law and Order Special Victims Unit has done a few episodes featuring transgender people. They have done a phenomenal job in depicting how a cis person can relate to trans people as normal people. The first time transgender became personal to me, I failed the test. I was still a Christian. My teenager asked me what I thought about trans people. I said I didn't understand how they could deny that they were what God made them to be. This response tells you several things. First, I hadn't heard about gender dysphoria, and I didn't know what it was. So when dealing with someone who doesn't understand transgender, this is the best place to start, explaining gender dysphoria. This frames the problems transgender people face as mental health issues. Too many religious people see this as a rebellion issue. Gender dysphoria, according to the American Psychiatric Association, involves a conflict between a person's physical or assigned gender and the gender with which he, she, they identify. People with gender dysphoria may be very uncomfortable with the gender they were assigned, sometimes described as being uncomfortable with their body, particularly developments during puberty, or being uncomfortable with the expected roles of their assigned gender. Gender dysphoria is not the same as gender nonconformity, which refers to behaviors not matching gender norms or stereotypes of the gender assigned at birth. Examples of gender nonconformity also referred to as gender expressiveness or gender creativity, includes girls behaving and dressing in ways more socially expected of boys, or occasional cross-dressing in adult men. Gender nonconformity is not a mental disorder. Gender dysphoria is also not the same as being gay or lesbian. Since I am defining terms here, I should also define non-binary. Most people, including most transgender people, are either male or female. But some people don't neatly fit into the categories of man or woman or male or female. For example, some people have a gender that blends elements of being a man or a woman, or a gender that is different than either male or female. Some people don't identify with any gender. Some people's gender changes over time. People whose gender is not male or female use many different terms to describe themselves, with non-binary being one of the most common. Other terms include genderqueer, agender, and bigender. I took this from the Center for Transgender Equality. Not all transgender people experience gender dysphoria. Some experience gender euphoria. They don't feel their sex-assigned gender is problematic, but they feel elated when referred to by opposite-sex gender pronouns. So being trans isn't just about hating yourself and your body. Going back to the question my teenager posed, because I failed the test, my teen didn't tell me that a close friend was trans. I found out months later from another source. When I found out, I began the journey of trying to understand. What was easy to understand was that if the Christian school where my child and the friend attended found out, the friend would likely be expelled. This was a secret we needed to guard closely. My teen and their friend have both since graduated, so the school is no longer a threat. If you are a regular viewer, you already know about this friend. His name is Matthias Holloway. His name is in the credits of all of my videos and in the description. He is the artist that drew my avatar. He is in a much better position to talk about transgender issues than I am.
When did you first realize that you were having feelings of being transgender?
Well, when I was, for as long as I can remember, like way back to like kindergarten, because like it's defined as not necessarily having dysphoria, but as having a disconnect. So I kind of felt that disconnect when since I was a kid, and I like always thought of myself as like a boy in a girl's body or something. And like it never really hit until like 9th, 10th grade, maybe.
Okay. And what changed at that time?
I don't know. Well, part of it was probably like puberty and stuff, like as it usually is. And I was getting more types of dysphoria than I had been getting. Like at first I'd had like, hair dysphoria and stuff like that. But like, I don't know, I was self-conscious about my body and my voice. And then like I mentioned what I'd been thinking the whole time to my dad one time, and he didn't go crazy, but
What does dysphoria feel like?
it's like there's like a whole bunch of different types. You can have it for like any part of anything, and
Okay.
like there's social dysphoria, like how others perceive you, and that feels like it's like you're kind of in a costume, like all year round. Like people always refer to you as that, and then like when Halloween comes around, you can take off the costume or something, and like people refer to you as like who you actually are, and like wow, that feels great. But like it feels even worse the other times when they're referring to you as whoever you are in the costume, and it's like I don't know, it's uncomfortable, and it's like I don't know, it makes a lot more relationships feel more surface level and stuff. And then for like body dysphoria and stuff, I don't know, it's icky. That's like the best word I have for it. Like it makes you want to claw at your skin at its worst, and it's not fun. It's like I don't know. It's like just below the skin. It's crawling. You know what I mean?
How do you deal with it?
Well, I mean, the permanent way to deal with it is like transitioning, like medically, like
Okay.
testosterone or estrogen, or how I deal with it is I have a binder.
Okay.
That like really helps with a lot of the chest dysphoria, and I wear boxers, which really help. And I don't know, like being around people who like know and who are like super chill about it and refer to you as like the right name, the right pronouns, it works wonders. It's amazing. Like the happiest I've ever been is surrounded by people who act like that, you know?
Okay. Okay. Do you have a lot of transgender friends?
I have a whole bunch actually. I do have a bunch. Most of them are college friends, and some are like internet mutuals and friends from like that I met online. But uh, there are a lot of people. Like there are way more people than you'd think, especially in the South, that are trans. Just like making it and thriving. Actually, it's pretty cool.
Are most of them around your age, or do you find people of all different ages?
I haven't personally, like, I've heard lots of stories about people more upwards of my age, but I think the oldest trans friend that I have is in their late 20s, maybe. I think the youngest that I have is maybe 14.
When did you first come out?
Well, the first time I actually like came out was to one of my friends in high school who, like a couple of months before that, had come out as bi to like the friend group.
Okay.
And so like I felt like okay, I can trust her. And then I came out because I was having a breakdown because like my art teacher, she like for some reason just went off on a tangent about how trans people have like some weird disease and we need to pray for them and stuff like that. I had to like leave the room and I ran to her in the hall and so I was like I told her what happened. So that was the first time I actually came out. And I was actually, I didn't come out to my parents. I actually was outed because they were watching what I did on social media and like how when I texted my friends and stuff, they're kind of looking into that. So they knew. They just kind of made me say it. It wasn't very fun.
Once you came out, were other people accepting of you as male?
Yeah, actually, most people I come out to have been completely accepting. Even some people from Westminster, the high school, even some people there that like I didn't know as well who like caught wind after I went off to college. Like they got in contact with me and were like super nice about it, and we've still been talking. And
How do you feel just in the community in general? Do people look at you as male, or do people kind of look at you and wonder what your gender is?
I've had a mix actually, which is pretty nice. Uh, apparently people have said that I pass like kind of well as male, but sometimes like when I open my mouth, my voice is obviously higher and stuff. I People do like a double take. They're like, "Whoa." They think I'm just some scrawny guy or something, but
Mhm.
uh, most of the time they usually see me as male, which is pretty cool.
Do you ever try to disguise your voice and try to make it sound more masculine?
I did in high school. I
Mhm.
did when I was around strangers, like at work, and I tried to do those voice deepening exercises, but like those hurt. Those really hurt. The more relaxed I am, like around people and around the community, it just kind of naturally like settles in one area, and eventually, I don't know, people start seeing that as not as a girl's voice, but as my voice. So it's like I don't think I have to anymore.
How often do you get misgendered?
Well, it depends on where I am. If I'm right now, I had to move back in with my parents, so it's pretty much like every day. But in when I was in Birmingham for college, it was the most times I got misgendered was either on the street, just like passing by, or by like a cashier, or sometimes like occasionally at work. But they tried their best, so I mean, I didn't really care then.
Okay. The people at work knew that you were male.
When I was applying for the job, I went ahead and told my boss that I identify as male and that I'm a guy and trans, and she was super chill about it. Of course, I had to have my legal name on the in the system, but people were really chill about it, and like they slipped up, but I mean, it was still nice that like they tried, they made an effort.
How do you feel when you are misgendered?
It's kind of like one of those. It's like a dabbing kind of feeling. Like you can physically feel it, especially if it comes out of nowhere. It's like it's real invalidating. Like it's kind of the same thing. Like if they do it on purpose, it's kind of the same thing as saying, "Hey, I don't care." you are who I say you are. It's not nice.
Are restrooms an issue for you?
When I'm on my own, I usually use the men's restroom. Like, of course, when I'm out with people I'm not out to, I have to use the women's, or I just hold it till I can find a gender neutral one. But usually, I've spent at college. I always use the men's restroom, and nobody really does a double take. It's kind of funny seeing the difference since I've been in both. I see the difference between how people interact, and like if you're a trans guy going to the men's restroom, nobody's gonna care. Like if you feel, as long as you feel safe, nobody really says anything.
What are your plans for the future?
I'm planning on going on hormone replacement therapy as soon as I can. Like as soon as I get enough money and am settled in an apartment in Birmingham. If I can ever afford it, I really want to get top and bottom surgery. Maybe if I can finish college, we'll see how that works out.
Have you had any help from counseling?
I have. I got diagnosed with gender dysphoria from a psychiatrist here in Huntsville. I think that was the first time I got diagnosed. But I went to a counselor before that who was like apparently not even licensed and super bad. She was like a social worker, but she was also a Christian counselor on the side. And she was like, it was not fun. But I also got diagnosed with dysphoria from a therapist. She was a Christian therapist too, but she was like super nice. She was one of the best I've had. So I got diagnosed a second time then. They didn't help me as much with my dysphoria, like managing it, because of course my psychiatrist, like she wants my parents to be on board. So I haven't been able to get a note written down from her to start HRT yet. But like they helped with some of the side effects of like dysphoria or being like constantly misgendered. So like help managing like, intrusive thoughts like, oh, you're a transgender or whatever.
How can the community best support you?
The best way for support is honestly just to be like, just to treat us like you would any other person, like to gender us the right way and at least make an effort to. And if you're not sure if we're out to our parents or to anybody else, then don't mention us. Like that's the one time it's okay to misgender somebody. Coming out to somebody is their own job and responsibility, and being outed is a huge deal, and it can like actually put people in serious danger. So just be careful with who you say, like what you say around who and stuff.
How do you feel about gender neutral pronouns?
I was really happy when the Merriam-Webster dictionary made them the word of the year or whatever last year, and like actually said, hey, by the way, they them are singular pronouns actually, because like they them pronouns been used like as singular ones have been around way longer than any of the binary ones. And I know people who use neopronouns like them. And those have been around since the 1800s. Like these aren't new.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like when people try to kind of invalidate them and like say, oh, there's some new Tumblr thing that's come up, it's not true, because they've been around longer than pretty much everybody who's been alive right now, and they've been around in all sorts of cultures. Third genders have been a thing in Native Americans. Cultures way back before Columbus even showed up. All words are made up anyway. So if someone's making up new pronouns, that's kind of how language works. So there's no problem in it.
Thank you very much for joining me. This has been Matthias Holloway. And Matthias is not only a friend of Robin's, but Matthias is also the one who drew my avatar. Thank you.
One thing we need to start doing is seeing gender as a spectrum. This is not new. Even as a child, we saw girls who had traditionally male characteristics and boys with traditionally female characteristics. Not trans people, but gender nonconformity. In the Native American culture, they refer to some people as being two-spirited. Use of they-them type pronouns for two-spirit people was not uncommon. What is a revolutionary idea to many my age is that sex and gender aren't the same. If you are trying to explain being trans to someone my age, this is something you will likely need to explain. I only understood it for the first time myself a year ago. Though my generation saw a spectrum of behaviors exhibited by people as being non-traditional, most of my generation would also associate that with sexuality. One would then assume that a person exhibiting non-traditional sex roles to be gay. So for the beginners, and I still consider myself a beginner, a person's gender identity is completely separate from their sexual preference. A person can be trans and straight, or cis. Cis means not trans, and straight. Or trans and gay, or cis and gay. Just like someone can be trans and prefer blue cars to red cars. The two are unrelated. The use of gender-neutral pronouns is becoming popular. We need to work at making them the norm. Some people prefer to be referred to as they, them, or another gender-neutral pronoun like sie, them, or sie, here. There are more, but I'll leave that for another day. Trying to use they, them as singular is where you really see me as a beginner. I have a hard time with this. I see they as plural and have had a hard time using it to refer to an individual. Here's where there is a generational issue from grammar usage. My teenager says that the singular they is like when a telemarketer calls and you don't know the name of the person, so you ask, what did they want? Except I don't see this question as applying to the telemarketer, but rather to the organization that the telemarketer represents. Thus, the they refers not to the person calling, but to the organization, and the organization is a they. Worse would be situations where a call comes in from a doctor's office, something like this. The doctor's office called. Oh, what did they want? They referring to the office as a collective. Or, the nurse from your doctor's office called. Oh, what did she want? Assuming the nurse to be female because more nurses are female than male. Or, your doctor called. Yes, what did he want? Assuming male because more doctors are male than female. You see how gender-neutral pronouns are not only better for the trans community, but also to break sexual stereotyping in the non-trans community, whether based on occupation or other factors. Gender assumptions are embedded in our everyday speech, but they can be hurtful to trans people and to cis people. When I was hospitalized several years ago, one of my nurses introduced himself as a male nurse. I thought this was odd because he was obviously male. I was saddened that sexual stereotyping made him feel that this was necessary. Shifting to gender-neutral pronouns whenever possible is beneficial to everyone. In prepping to make this video, I read Lee Airton's book, Gender, Your Guide, which you saw as I made into a poster behind myself in the introduction. Lee Airton, PhD, is an assistant professor of gender and sexual studies at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. Airton analogizes the they singular to when an unknown person is knocking at the door and you ask, I wonder what they want. This is why I say this is generational. While I hear this from younger people, I myself would never say it. I would say, I wonder what he or she wants. Or just, I wonder what he wants, with he being a universal he. When I was in elementary school, we were taught that they is never singular, that using they to refer to an unknown person was grammatically incorrect. It might have been, but it no longer is. But because this was my early training, and it was for people my age and older, it is going to take a shift in thinking for me to be able to see they as a singular. So young people, tell us you prefer to be called they, but please give us time to adjust in thinking this way. It's new. And forgive us if we forget. I used to have a fantastic memory, but after 55, it has gone downhill. Old people, we need to let the young choose their own pronouns. Even though our school teachers told us that this is incorrect usage, the usage of words changes over time. I remember when gay meant happy, and literally meant not figuratively. They is another word that no longer means what it did when we were young. Misgender is another word that is new for my generation. even though the concept is not. Trans and non-binary people are frequently referred to by the wrong gender pronouns. This is misgendering. When we were young, we were taught that if you didn't know a person's gender and you needed to use gender, like if you had to decide whether to say sir or madam, you should use male pronouns. This is because it was considered more insulting to refer to a male as female than to refer to a female as male. Now that people have so many more gender options than just male or female, misgendering a person becomes much more likely. The easiest way to keep from misgendering a person is to ask for the person's pronouns, if possible, or to use gender-neutral pronouns. When we meet people for the first time, it would be helpful if it became the norm to give your pronouns. On Twitter, I have my pronouns in my description, even though my gender is obvious from my name. You can hear my attempts to start making this normal for myself. In writing this script, I went back to the part where I told the story about my teenager testing the waters to whether or not to reveal their trans friend to me. I had used gendered pronouns. I edited this script to replace all the gendered pronouns that refer to my child with gender-neutral pronouns. Did it seem awkward? Probably not to those of you hearing it. It was a little awkward for me to write it that way, as I'm not accustomed to referring to my child by gender-neutral pronouns. But I'll get over it. You will too. Airton advises that when meeting trans people, don't aim for no mistakes. You will make mistakes. Aim for making better mistakes. When you misgender someone, say sorry, correct yourself, and move on. If you dwell on the fact that you made a mistake, you draw more attention to it, and you make the situation worse. Worse yet is when you get so upset about your error that your trans friend now has to comfort you when you were the one that injured them. The better mistake is to just move on. Try again next time. Use gentle correction if you are in a group and a friend uses the wrong pronoun to refer to another person. Remind them, remember, Lee prefers to use they rather than he or she. If this is the fourth time you've had to say this to your friend, keep your exasperation to yourself. Venting your frustration will only draw more attention to the issue and will hurt your friend's feelings as well. What do you say when a child doesn't meet gender norms? Or when a child asks you, Mom, is that a man or a woman? Lee Airton answers this in this interview.
I often say to parents, like if you have a kid, like if your kids are engaging in some kind of play that isn't typical for their gender, don't be like, oh my gosh, Lewis, it's so great that you're playing with the Barbies. Can I play with you? Right? That's just as weird as being like, Lewis, put that down, you know? Like, just chill.
Yeah.
Right? Just chill. So just don't try to best not to devote any more information or focus to that as you would to them doing something else. Just try to monitor your reactions to that kind of play.
Right.
But like when kids like to categorize, as we all know, and they don't yet internalize that we don't sort of talk about that. Right? So they're like, is that a man or a woman? And what I say to parents is just be like, I don't know. Why is it your business?
Yeah.
Do something else.
Yeah.
Right? Or like, I don't know. Anyway, what's going on over here? How are you? If you want to do
One of my favorite gender-neutral openings is this one.
What's up, heathens? How ya doing?
If you don't know him, that was Godless Engineer. Of course, you can't use this greeting in all situations, but it is fun to think about using it as you enter a party. Matt talked about transitioning. Not all trans people transition. Of those that do, some change their gender expression by their clothing choices. Some use hormone treatments, and some choose surgery. When you see someone that doesn't fit a traditional gender category, don't ask when they will transition or how. They may have chosen not to. Even if they do have plans for this, it's a very personal question and one you shouldn't be asking. The result is usually embarrassing for everyone. Let your trans friend bring the subject up if they want to. Now, if you know someone who has had surgery, by all means ask about their health with regards to the surgery. Just don't ask if they have plans to do more surgery or if they are done. This implies that they haven't done enough to express their gender to your satisfaction, and satisfying your norms for gender expression shouldn't be the goal. Restrooms create the biggest issue for most trans people. When asked, "Where is the restroom?" it's best not to assume which restroom the asker wants. Direct them to both gendered and gender-neutral rooms if they are both available. Don't express surprise at another person using the restroom with you. Assume that everyone in the room belongs there. This is less embarrassing to both the trans person in the right place as well as the cis person who may have made a mistake. I personally have used the men's room, though I'm more comfortable with the women's. I've done it when there's been a long line for the women's and no line for the men's, due to the lack of gender parity that we still have in gendered restrooms. The increasing use of gender-neutral rooms will greatly reduce this imbalance. The primary argument against gender-neutral policies in restrooms is that cis women and girls will be more vulnerable to attack from men entering gender-neutral restrooms. In 2017, CNN debunked this by conducting interviews with 27 law enforcement agencies in states with gender identity anti-discrimination laws. None reported any cis women or girls being attacked. By contrast, 70% of people surveyed that are trans or gender nonconforming people reported being denied access, verbal harassment, or physical attack from using gendered restrooms. It is transgender people who are at risk in restrooms, not the other way around. I've only lightly touched on several issues that are so much deeper, but this is a video for beginners. I'd like to conclude by pointing out that the goal isn't for a gender-neutral world, but a gender-friendly one. Instead of calling into question how a person expresses gender, or by trying to ignore it, try to create a space where gender expression is encouraged in all of its varieties. In other words, let others live as they want to live their lives, and live your life.